Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So this is gonna be the second episode of champions that are great but I hate playing. So basically the first episode was Void and I wanted to make sure that everybody kind of understands the purpose. I do not think that Void is a bad champion, by no means. He's definitely useful, he's definitely good for many different situations. He's a great champion throughout and has helped and will help many people throughout the contest. Right. The point is, I don't particularly enjoy using him. And that's all these videos are about. The things that I dislike or get annoyed about, or the reasons why I try not to use these champions, even though they are good, right? So I'm not trying to say that Void is a bad champion, nor that I will try and say that the next champion in this series is particularly horrible. I'm just saying, find them boring, or don't like them, or there are many things that I don't like about them. Either way, so now that that is out of the way, we're going to be taking a look at a champion that is many people's favorite. Many people absolutely love this champion, swear by it, and if you say anything bad about it, it's pretty much as if you insulted their family's history or implied some sort of nasty things about their mother. Either way, it is Starky Spider-Man. Now, again, before we get to all of the bits of why I don't like playing with Starky Spider-Man, we can definitely reiterate what's good about him and why people like him. So people like him largely because of his damage output, because he produces quite big crits quite frequently. He has a high crit rate by building up those poises, gets a bunch of extra attack, and overall his damage output is somewhere up there. It's not the best, but it's accessible relatively early in a fight. And it's up there. So definitely great damage, lots of yellow numbers, what's not to love, right? In addition to all of that, we have power drain on heavy attack every half a minute, I believe. Can be extremely life-saving. He also has a super reliable stun on level 1, which can also do stun loops under certain conditions. So it's perfect for cheesing, so he has an ability to cheese many different fights. Again, what's not to love, right? Or he has a good amount of shock on his level 2, which basically gets doubled against robot champions, so he has this ability to put him a bit of an overdrive. And he also has, in my opinion, extremely underestimated level 3 that can basically bypass all of the evade effects, which is super underrated and extremely useful in longer fights. Now all of that kind of like combined with his synergy with Blade and the way he makes Blade a better champion, so on and so forth, he's a great champion, right? Well, yeah, he's good. Like, it definitely has his uses, definitely many people's favorite. He can definitely help you throughout a lot of content when it comes to kind of like mid-tier. And there are many people who insist that he's great for endgame, but again, I cannot say that he isn't. I can only say that I haven't seen many people use him in most of the endgame content, as far as I have observed it, and he is starting to kind of fall off the radar, because I definitely do not see him in IQ map 7, do not see him in AW, and hardly ever see anybody even mention him in 6.2, 6.3. That being said, I have heard that there are some people who use him for certain lanes, have some moderate level of success, so fair enough. But this video isn't about whether he's a good or bad champion. I think the video title pretty much establishes in itself that he is in fact a good champion, and the fact that I don't like using him. And now we can talk about that, right? So when I have to make kind of my initial impressions about Starky Spider-Man, in my mind, he is a cheap, off-brand, knockoff plastic wind-up toy. And as we go through this video, we're going to be discussing exactly why I feel that way about him. So let's begin with the wind-up part, right? So he's a wind-up toy because you have to get this wind-up motion of kind of like building up those poise charges. To do that, you need to basically dex about 10 times at the beginning of the fight, and that whole animation of his evade is kind of like flippity flop on the back wheel there, and it does remind you of you winding up a toy car, for instance, for it to let go forward as soon as you're done. And that is one of the biggest problems I have with this character, is the fact that you have to do that at the beginning of every fight before you actually start the real fight and you start doing the damage, and before anything else in the fight really matters. So that's kind of like the prelude, pre-course of any fight. So even though he has access to a lot of damage output early on, you still have to put in extra amount of work. To put in comparison, in my mind, it's like this. If I have to dex 10 times opponent's attack, it is at least equal to me having to land, I don't know, 30 hits on opponent or something of the sort. Like, you know what I mean? It's still X amount of work with X amount of margin of error, and just because it doesn't reflect it on the hit counter, it doesn't mean it doesn't take time, it doesn't mean it doesn't take effort, and doesn't mean it doesn't have to be done in order to access this big damage output. So when you compare Starky and SpiderMan, oh, he got this fight down in, I don't know, 10 hits, and then there is another big damage output champion who can get this fight down in 15 hits. I will take those 15 hit champions any time of the day, just because they don't have to also dex 10 times at the beginning of every fight. That, yeah, takes time, so it's not even quicker than landing 15 hits. There is much bigger margin of error, and there's a lot bigger chance of you getting smacked, and combined with Starky and SpiderMan's tiny little health pool, it actually is a lot more risky. So no, I do not think he's like great for super short fights. I definitely think there are better champions, even if they hit somewhat less overall. The fact that you don't have to wind them up, for me, is a winning category. Now, I see, that being said, the biggest problem with that whole wind-up thing, aside from the time, aside from the effort, is the fact that you make no progress in the fight. So, what I mean by it, every fight you have to basically dex 10 times or close to it, or whatever, X amount of times, right? That's also the time you're not dealing damage to your opponent, you're not hitting them, and that means if you do happen to make a mistake while you're dexing, you have made zero progress in the fight aside from getting some poise charges, but you commit yourself to this risk of getting hit, because it does require fairly specific timing. And now, I'm not the worst player in the game, I'm also not the best player in the game for sure. I'm certainly not the best Starky and SpiderMan player in the world, but no matter how well you play with this guy, there's always a percentage of risk, and I don't want to subject myself to potentially, let's say, effectively be disqualified from the fight before the fight starts if you happen to make a mistake. Now, there are many different build-up champions where you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to kind of like unlock some burst damage potential or do whatever else. But the difference there is that you are at least making some sort of progress, and if you happen to mess up along the way, then you're gonna have done some damage. You can come back in the fight and you can see the fruits of your labor. You can see the result, you can see the damage on opponent's health bar. If you mess up while building up Starky and SpiderMan, and you die, you come back in the fight and you see opponent still on a full health bar. That's it, he's still full. You have not done any meaningful progress in the fight. So that idea in itself, I really kind of detest. I really hate the idea that I have to kind of like put up X amount of work to even be able to progress in the fight. And if I happen to mess up, I haven't done any meaningful progress for the next fight. Now, all of that keeping in mind, right? All of that keeping in mind, you can combine it with the fact that he has one of the lowest health pools in the game. If I'm not mistaken, he is in bottom 3 lowest health pool champions in the game. So it means he's one of the 3 most fragile champions. To put in comparison, this is a rank for Starky and SpiderMan. He has 18k health. And I do happen to know that Void has one of 10 or one of 5 biggest health pools. So we can take a look at other side of the spectrum. So Starky and SpiderMan has 18k health. This one has 27% health. So it's effectively like, what, 33% health less? Or Void has 50% health more? Close to that. So yeah, imagine if you're playing Starky and SpiderMan, whenever you enter the fight, then you have 50% health boost running as in comparison. And still, it is noticeable even with champions who are not as high on the other side of the spectrum. So he is in fact extremely fragile and finicky, And that definitely shows because his block proficiency is not high either, and the whole visual aspect of when you're playing this guy in somewhat serious content and you take a parry and you lose 7% of your total health, you go like, ooh, this is not good, right? And God forbid you miss a parry or that passive wade triggers and they manage to land a couple of hits in a block and all of a sudden 35% of your health is gone. So I definitely do not like that. Again, even though I'm not the worst player and I can probably, let's say, pull it off semi-consistently, I'm still heavily against the idea that even if I so much as take a parry, I will lose a visible chunk of my total health, or even worse when you get hit. And all of that being put together with the fact that he has to remain above 50% in order to be able to access this higher crit rate, that definitely kind of smells a recipe for disaster, where if one thing goes wrong, then the entire fight is essentially in the bin. Because let's say if you mess up winding him up and opponent lands a combo on you and you end up being at 35%, then even if you finish building up your poise charges and you get in the fight and you fight perfectly, you're never gonna have this optimal damage output why you brought him in the fight in the first place. And yeah, therefore there is never that sense of security like you can get with many other champions. There's always this kind of like worry, if one slip, one wrong move is essentially gonna send the entire fight crumbling down. You're gonna either get KO'd or no health, and then you're gonna lose all of your damage or part of your damage, and so on and so forth. So I'm definitely not feeling comfortable and or safe using this guy because of the low health pool as well and the high block damage, which is definitely a big issue in endgame, and the fact that he has absolutely no way to sustain himself. He has no regen, he has no chance to kind of like increase his block proficiency or anything of the sort. Basically it's just potion up and get to the next fight if you survive this one. And the last thing is that passive wade. That passive wade I hate on every single champion. Now, thankfully, Kabam, when it comes to the latest Spider-Verse champions or many of the newer wade champions, make sure that that wade only activates when you're not blocking. So when you're trying to parry, it's not going to interfere like the Spider-Gwen or Stealth Suit Spider-Man. But Starky Hand Spider-Man doesn't have that. And the fact that you can be trying to go for a parry, but opponent is gonna basically force you to evade, and then there is that moment of confusion when you don't really know what happened because you were expecting opponent to be stunned, he's not, you're moving backwards, you're thinking what is the best thing to do now. Do you hold the block and take a hit on a block? Do you try to parry again? Do you try to dash back, or what you do? And there's always quite a large moment of risk involved in these kind of situations. And even let's say if you manage to hit that block back on the screen in a timely manner, you're going to end up taking more hits on a block than it's necessary, and that's going to push you closer to that 50% mark, and that's just going to be a negative experience overall. And that is not even mentioning the fact that you get this chance heavily increased if you happen to slip below 50% health, because then his signature ability obviously changes and your chance to evade increases by a lot, right? And that just makes him more prone for the same situation to repeat itself again. You take more unnecessary block damage and having to potion up for the next fight. Now, that being said, obviously the low health pool kind of helps to potion him up, but at the same time I don't typically enter a quest with an idea that I'll have to use potions to make sure that I can use this character. So those are the main things that I dislike. So again, it's a cheap, off-brand, knockoff, fragile, wind-up toy that technically works for as long as you touch it. If you touch it once with a firmer grip, everything just goes to pot, right? And that is the case the way I view fighting with Starky Hand Spider-Man. Obviously, I have had some really good fights with him, and obviously he has managed to put in some work with me even as a rank 4, or back in the day when rank 4 was pretty much the highest you could get your champions to. I had him at rank 4 at all of those times. I had him quite early, and I just never really got into the whole concept or the love that this character gets, and I'm extremely grateful to Ghost. Why I'm extremely grateful to Ghost? Because Ghost came out, most people forget about Starky and Spider-Man, and I completely lost any need for this guy whatsoever, and I have not had to use him in a really long time. Now obviously I have played him here and there just for fun kind of thing, but I haven't had to rely on this guy like ever. If Ghost hadn't come out, I would probably have had to rank this guy up, and I would probably have had to use him much more often than I have in the last year or two. Therefore, huge thank you to Ghost for saving me of being forced to play with this cheap off-brand knockoff wind-up toy that I heavily dislike. I can respect what it can do. It can definitely be a fun champion. It can get you through some tough fights. That's all fair enough. It has helped me. But when it comes to the enjoyment of the game, liking using the champion, I don't. I never will. I doubt I ever will. Yeah, and I'm grateful to Ghost for making sure that I have absolutely no interest in anything this champion can do for me. And yeah. So there we go. We have finished trash talking Starky and Spider-Man now. And again, comment section, I'm ready. I think the Void video is actually one of the most disliked videos I have uploaded in recent months. So that was kind of funny because it definitely feels that even though I'm trying to make sure that I put it across that I do know that these champions are good, there are comments like, oh, how dare you talk bad about this guy? It's like, but I didn't say he sucks. Either way, we're gonna see what happens with this Spider-Man video. We're gonna see how many of you actually watch it through the end, and we're gonna see how many crazy, mad comments we can get about this. But now that we are done with Stark Enhanced Spider-Man and everything I dislike about that guy, I think it's also appropriate that we pre-warn the public about the next champion that we are going to be talking about. And the next champion I'm going to be talking about is in fact going to be Gladiator Hulk, because Gladiator Hulk also is kind of divisive. There are many people who absolutely love this guy. I never did. I never have. I can respect one ability that champion possesses, but if I had any power in this game, I would take that face me ability of this huge pile of garbage and give it to a champion that's actually decent. All of that being said, we're gonna get to talk about this guy in the next episode, so stay tuned. If you did like today's video, then do share it with your friends, do share it with all of the people who love Stark Enhanced Spider-Man, just to see their reaction. And yeah, come back for the next video. Hulk Ragnarok is up. See ya.